Okay, I decided to squeeze in a little bit of coding before I finish up for the night. So looking at the to-do list, it looks like return is next on the list, and I more or less have that implemented, I believe, from the prior work that I've done on this project. So if I go ahead and open up the old version of eval module, in fact, I should probably move a lot of the eval stuff from the core mod.rs to its own file, I'm guessing. But I don't really need to worry about that too much right now. So one of the main things I'm going to need to do is import this new escape type, which is going to, well, for this work or the current feature, it's going to be used for just capturing return values. Later on, it'll be used for breaks and continues out of what's called loops. But for the moment, this escape idea is just going to be used for return values. So let's see, no, eval prog won't get that, but all the other eval functions more or less will. I'm not sure about that one actually. Okay, so that won't. And maybe that's all of the functions that will get an escape. So with that done, let me just open up this as well actually. Just a little crib sheet to the side here, or not crib sheet, but chat window. And so, first of all, we're going to do a match at the program root to double check what gets returned by eval statements, and it should be nothing at this point. If there is, it suggests that a return statement was called in the root of the script, which is going to be a runtime exception. I'm just looking at this comment as well, whether I'm going to use an option type, and that should be option though. I think I'll stick with the current approach just to keep the types a little simpler. So if there is an escape none, that's what we want. But if there's an escape return, then we will have an issue with that. So we'll return an error like before, but we'll have a new error value. Now, I probably will want to get a line number here, but we can handle that later. I need to remember as well to add this to the features document, so I'll just put it here while I think of it so I can handle it later. Now, what can I do with a return here? Maybe it is a bit preemptive to do returns before I've actually implemented any operations. Yeah, maybe I will actually implement at least arithmetic first. So pause this for a second. Okay, and so I'll continue the work I was doing previously on arithmetic. So let's see, jump into the source of val mod, and where was I with this? So I think it was compiling at least. Don't think I had too much left to do with this. Will I implement it for strings at the moment? Concatenation. I'll see. Anyway, so I think I have to so parse errors is in tests. That should solve that, I think. Yeah, so all the tests are passing. So now I will want to add in some, let's see, well, again, go to docs and we'll add in a new And I'll also want to add in precedence tests as well. So I hope I remember that. I don't think I have an actual pre-commit check. Let me see. Yeah, so I think if I include the no commit keyword in one of the files, then it shouldn't get committed. So I should be safe enough with that. I'll put that as a comment so that the test still passes. So let's see. To only have integer division at the moment, so kind of old school Python style. And modulo, that will be 1. And what am I missing here? Minus. So let's give those a go. I think I have an odd number of tests though. 2, 4, oh no, I have the correct amount. Can't apply plus two integers. Now why would that be the case? So let's take a look at the module. So I have a match there. Oh, because I haven't, yeah. So I haven't implemented all the rest of the operators. So for all these guys, I'll need to do something like this. simpler way of doing this, but just get it working. This should be fine. I wonder, will this say that it's not comprehensive enough? I wonder, will Rust be smart enough to see that op can only be one of these, and so I don't have to check for others, but not a big deal if that's not the case. But 469, what's going on here? Yeah, I need to do that. Yeah, that's the case now. Whether I should take the op itself there. Yeah, I probably will do that, and I'll instead create a render function. Like realistically, I should be able to put a panic there. I don't like putting panics in code, but it is a case that shouldn't happen. Okay, so the tests seem to be passing now anyway. So that should more or less be the initial implementation of arithmetic out of the way. I'll remove some commented out code from earlier. I might create a helper function here, so that. So we also have string concatenation there as well, which is nice. Now, are there any Clippy errors? Line 209. Yes, now this is a holdover from the last implementation of this code base. So it unlocks and unwraps the operator that we're, or sorry, not the operator, but the operands that we're working with. And it does that sequentially, so we shouldn't run into issues. Let me just double check. So it does get addresses of values. And it does it sequentially, so we shouldn't run into issues with the unlocking of those. So if you have two values that need to be accessed at the same time and they're behind mutexes, and the two mutexes that you're trying to access happen to be the same item, then you can run into deadlock because you've unlocked one and then you're trying to unlock the second variable, but it's already being used. So let's try this. X is 1, Y is 2, and we'll go X plus Y, and X plus X, and Y plus Y. Oops. Or we'll go X plus 3. So then we should get what? 2, 3, and 4. So let's try that. And I should have checked what are the Clippy errors that I'm getting. So main, I've got 2 matching arms. That's just me being careless. Sum and sub. And so multiplication modulo, plus and minus, and I should have, yeah, division is fine. And that seems to be all of the Clippy errors actually. And so we do seem to be hitting a deadlock issue, so this is still the case. So what I'll probably need to do, so first of all I'll cancel that. I'll just double check. I'll comment out these 2 lines and I'll run the tests again, see if it happens with just X plus X. Yeah, that tests the theory, and then if I comment that out, it'll get a failure, but at least the test will finish. So that's that's unlocking it within, I guess, the scope defined as the end of the parameters list. So what I'll probably want to do instead of getting the address of that, I'll probably want to clone the value. Let's try that. Now that could be expensive, but hopefully not. So let's see, 377. Borrow LHS. Again, just to get this stuff working, I'm just going to throw in a few clones and then work to resolve it after. No, that's still not resolving it. That could be a tricky one. And again, just to make sure, I'm going to comment out the X plus X. Yeah, and the test works, it just fails because that one was commented out. Whew, so let's see. Maybe I'll have to let's see. So I basically want to make sure that I want to constrain the lifetime for which the LHS value is unlocked. The bar on the left, oh yeah, so that's probably, oh yeah. Yeah, thanks for the question. So that's me just messing with my different panes, I guess. With trying to get the maximum amount of information on the screen while still keeping it legible, I do a lot of messing around with expanding and contracting the tabs. So yeah, so I think Vim still keeps the pane at least one character wide. So that's the explanation for that. So looking at this, again, this might be something almost like a silly solution, but it might at least resolve the issue in front of us, which then I can start iterating on to actually come up with a longer term solution. So let's try this. And I better actually uncomment the tricky part of the code. So method not found in box. Yes, so that's, yeah, I should be working with LHS val here. Okay, so that seems to have resolved that anyway. So at least in theory, the resolution here was, so previously we had this mutex unlock getting unlocked here and then persisting through to the end of this scope, and then a second unlock of the same mutex was happening within that scope, which was getting blocked because you can't unlock the same mutex twice. So that it's mutual exclusion, so you can only have one exclusive access to the data. So the resolution then was to first unlock the first value, get the copy of it, and then release the lock on that and follow up by unlocking and cloning the second value. Now, in theory, I shouldn't need to do this anyway because I still have a clone of I already have cloned the first value, so unlocking the second one should be fine. And in fact, let's go ahead and test that theory here. And this might be something to comment out. So I made the same mistake again. Yeah, so that seems to be working as expected. Oh, thanks for the question. So the reason for mutexes, so in this project, I'm writing a programming language from scratch. And so I'm writing it in Rust, which has lots of nice properties, but then one of the main features of Rust is its strong borrow checker. So each variable that you define has to have a predefined and understood lifecycle that Rust can use for static analysis. And so because the language that I'm then defining in Rust doesn't have those constraints on variables, I need to essentially flag to Rust that, oh, these variables work outside that system. And first of all, I'm using mutexes to say that, okay, these don't have a regular life cycle. So instead, basically just wait until, oh yeah, I always get confused between the reference counting and the mutexes, but essentially the mutexes are for allowing me to ignore the borrow requirements on the variables, and then I also have them atomically reference counted, so that if I do, which I'm not sure if I will, it makes it easier anyway regardless, but if I were to have threads in this new language as well, for example, having them within reference counted mutexes allows me to, again, relax those constraints of Rust and still be able to compile the program. So I hope that makes sense. I can possibly give a bit more information on that, even though I'm a bit sketchy on the details. It's been a while since I actually looked at the theory behind mutexes and reference counting and all this kind of stuff. So I understand it from kind of a practical point of view, but in terms of the project at the moment, that's the main reason for the mutexes anyway. So getting back to this, so I mean, this is functional, but not so pretty. And let me see, I can probably go back to having these be copies as well, so I can pass the address of that in here. And do that. Does it still run? Yeah, so we're good from that point of view. Now, how to make this a little tidier, because I don't think, well, first of all, I can, okay, so I might just apply some of the easy Clippy suggestions. So the value is dropped without further use. That's because these are cloned now, but if I remove those clones now that I'm passing in references, that's probably no longer the case. I probably do have to clone them in those spots now. I need to remember to handle that as well. And so, yeah, maybe Clippy will have a suggestion for this. So it's saying matching a single binding. Okay. So if I do it like this, and do the v clone, I guess Rust will be smart enough to end the scope of this here. Again, that's one of the tricky bits of not using Rust day to day. So so that doesn't work as it should. I need to actually constrain the scope of the variable. So I'll save that again, and let's see. I mean, I could create an artificial block like this. Yeah, exactly. So, oh yeah. So exactly. So if, in fact, so that's a good point. So the fact that you have multiple mutable references to the same value is what kind of necessitates the mutex here. In the very, very early stages of writing this language, where I was basically just working with read-only values, then I didn't have to worry about the mutex because values weren't getting mutated. So I could just pass pointers I get, or are they called pointers in Rust? I guess you're just passing everything by addresses and things like that. But yeah, to be able to actually modify the data in variables, that necessitated mutexes because for example, not only do you have the stack where you could be, and closures where you could be modifying variables in different functions by closing over the data or accessing it from a global scope, you could be even things like if statements and while loops, anything that introduces a block essentially introduces a new scope, which could be, again, I guess in theory, none of that really matters when it's single threaded anyway. But even knowing that on the developer side, I think it was in general still easier just to use arcmutexes to let Rust know that I knew what was going on, rather than trying to use addresses and mutable addresses and things for everything like that. So basically just turning off one of the Rust's, I guess, constraints for these specific values, i.e. the variables that we create in the language. So let's see, let's try this again, but we'll do it in a smaller scope. And we can do clone here then. And in fact, I think oh, this is not gonna look nice. No. No, I don't like that. Does it compile at least? We'll worry about whether it works first, and then we'll worry about cleaning it up. Yeah, it works. I don't like that it works, but it works. So no, I can't have it look like that. So with that in mind, do I actually need that ampersand mutable? I don't think I do. I possibly don't even need the can I oh, I don't like that. That is just so much going on in one line. Actually, why don't I just pull it out into its own function? Yeah. Functions to the rescue. So let's see. So clone, just clone value. And we'll try that. So I know it says lock. I always call it unlocking the variable. Makes more sense in my head anyway. But we, I guess, get a lock on this value that creates a mutex guard, I believe, and then this dereference gets us at the data that's in the guard, which is where our actual value is defined. And then we use the, in fact, is value at source. Oh yeah, so we have v in source. That's the reason for the v name. Wonder, should I just call that value? I think it would make more sense, but however. So we then get the address of the raw value underneath everything, and then we clone that. So let's try this. I wonder, can I take the address of the thing returned from the function in that way? Nice. And that doesn't look as absolutely horrendous as it did before anyway. So take a reference here. Yeah, makes sense to me. I'm happy with that. And that means I'll need to do that there. Now, time to add a comment for why we're putting a clone value here. So this comment is basically for future me when I say, oh, why am I doing this instead of just doing that? And this will be a nice reminder that, oh, you tried this before, it crashed the program, or possibly worse, it made the program hang. So let's see, in a separate scope. So does that message make sense on its own? We clone the value inside the LHS. Arcmutex. In a separate scope instead of using that. Because with the latter approach, maybe I'll split that into a second sentence. This is because with the latter approach, if left hand side value and right hand side value refer to I think that kind of captures the sentiment anyway. So let's see. So I have my operations file. So I have arithmetic. What's the next one? Concatenation. Hello plus world. Let's try that. Plus 2 minus multiplied by 3 minus 4. And what should that give? Come on, quick maths. 1 plus 2 is 3 anyway. Multiplied by minus 1 is minus 3. Oof. Sharp. Still got it. So where will that be printed now? Print after the object, I guess. So I think that's there. No, that wasn't where it went. Where did it go? It should be minus 1. Oh, no. Arithmetic. So multiplication first. So that's 1 plus 6 minus 4 is 3, I guess. Yeah, so after the object is 3. And a reminder to myself to implement precedence, or at least precedence tests. So hello and world, and this file is getting, the tests in this file are getting a bit sizable, so I guess I will split it up into different sections finally. So let's see. Got my features document, and I might as well have a one-to-one correspondence with them. So I have null, true, integers, strings. And I will put those up here. Then I will have the section on, I guess operations should go above variables, they're a bit simpler, I would say, conceptually. So that would be 3, and this would be hello world. Variables. Two variables scoping, or let's call it scoping. One, two, three, four, and then the final one should be 2. And now we can make our function test and documentation a little bit more interesting by actually incorporating operations. So let's see, functions. Wow, what an interesting test now. Oh, I don't have P defined anymore. Let's try this. Okay. So variable scoping, what's the issue here? Yeah, there's no semicolon at the end there. Variable scoping. Cool, and that's all the functions passing again, and I might update the, I'm sure there is a closure. Yeah, some of the tests are somewhat, or so, yeah, some of the tests are duplicated between the test files and the features files, but that is okay. Cool. And so let's see where we are in terms of defining, or in terms of the commit. Oh yeah, I need to update the documentation. Oh yeah, and I also want to have precedence test. Yeah, so I do have concatenation. Do I really need to put out in the answers here? I guess it's okay, so we do precedence. So if we do 1 plus 2 multiplied by 3, then that should be 7 rather than 9. And if I do the opposite, it should respect multiplication being done first, so that's 2 plus 3 is 5. And same with subtraction and division. Let's see. That doesn't really make sense. So 6 minus 4 divided by 2 maybe? No. Oh yeah, that was still, so that's 1. 6 divided by 4 minus 2 will give 0. And we go 5 multiplied 2 plus 1 will give 2. Oops. So 7, 5, and this gives 4. Interesting. And that gives minus 1, so 6 divided by 4. Oh yeah, it gives minus 1. And this is 4 divided by 2. Oh yeah, it gives 4. Oh dear, it's getting late. And so that should be about it for the tests. And I still have a no commit on evalmod. Ah yes, because I wanted to see if I could handle this in a slightly nicer way. And do I have runtime errors for the operations actually? No, not yet. So let's see, true plus an object doesn't work. What to do about this? Again, all the nitty bitty details that I spend way too long thinking about. So one option is to put a catch-all down here and be like panic because this should never happen, but I don't like that. Another option is to essentially do what this is doing but hide it behind a function. So this is apply binary operation, arith operation. Though that's not really gonna work when I add more operations that aren't just arithmetic operations, so things like binary operations. So maybe I will actually, I don't like panicking, but Rust panic. And it just takes a string, isn't it? Probably as good as I'm going to get it just for the moment anyway. Bad types. So, interesting, I need to handle that as well. So, can't apply plus to bool and object. Are there any other errors that I need to handle as well? So we've, yeah. And I need to update that file as well, actually. to be 1, 9. It's probably going to be 1, 1, but we'll see anyway. So we need to add location information here. So what's my function for it? New location error. Thinking what's the best thing to do here, because usually I'd wrap around at this point. The error line stuff is very ugly looking always, at least when I've been adding it anyway. And this seems to continue on that idea, but oops. Then go line and col perhaps. Let's try this. Yeah, I had a feeling that would be the case. So let's go here. Okay, and so that's that working as expected. Do I want to give the position of the operator or the position of the expression, because at the moment it's getting the position of the expression, which starts at position 1, but then the operator is in the middle, how easy would it be to get the position of the operator? I don't think it'd actually be that difficult. And in the past, when I'd say that, that would precede a lengthy debugging session. That would probably mean an hour of work at least. But I think in this case, I might even be learning. This is such a messy production. Oh yeah, and now that I have that, I might as well actually use it. So mod.rs location. Let's try that. Okay, and now we'll actually do that thing, the dereferencing. And yeah, that's cool. So now if I go to column 6, that's actually where the error is occurring. In this case, it should give me column 7. Oh, yeah. Cool. That seems to be working out all right. So I need to go into ast.rs. Hello, Rugs. My switches. Oh, the keyboard. Yeah, sorry, I'm I'm not au fait with the lingo. So this is my, what's it called? Kinesis 2, Kinesis Advantage 2. So I think, again, I know very little about this stuff, but it's, I think, Cherry MX. Let me double check that. So basically, took me way too long as well to Cherry MX mechanical key switches. Took me way too long to get adjusted to. Oh, sorry, i7. It sounds like you don't like the sound. Yeah, I actually wouldn't be too big of a fan of the sound myself, but the keyboard does help me not be in pain when I'm typing, so I soldier on. So let's see. So let's see. We have binary up there. Oh yeah, and I lost my train of thought there for a second, but I need to put a space. Oh, I didn't have a space there either. There we go. Okay. Yeah, like, was it the mechanical sound was something that I liked for a little bit when I got introduced to them first. But I was always like, yeah, that sounds nice for someone else's setup. I like eavesdropping on someone else typing with them, but it's a trade-off that I'm fairly indifferent to at this point in the keyboard that I'm using. I mean, the benefits for it at the moment outweigh the sound for me at the moment. But it's one of those things where I guess I'm just too too old to be concerned with anymore. I had a conversation with someone else recently as well when we were talking about configuring Linux and things like that, and he was talking about Xmonad, and I remember spending so long in college and the likes setting up my Xmonad configuration and configuring Linux and having the desktop environment break when I installed some updates and having to install Linux again and reconfigure it. And I feel my capacity for all the extraneous stuff in terms of like bells and whistles and configuration, things like that. I'm so I have precious little time for those kind of things anymore. Not that I have anything against them, but my own capacity for being interested in them has passed a while ago. These days it's kind of the less I have to do to be able to jump in and just start a project, the better for me. That's kind of what the sooner I can jump into that essentially feedback loop where I write a bit of code and I get to find out whether that code is working or not. The sooner I can jump into that, the better. Match single symbol token. I'm not sure I've really found a programming language or environment yet that does that for me. I mean, the simplest thing I can do in general is just copy another, what's that, main.rs. The obsessive part of me always needs to make sure that all these switch statements are sorted. So token div, let's see. But in terms of languages that actually kind of get out of your way and just let you start programming, I guess scripting languages are always going to be some of the easiest for that because, well, compiled languages, I guess. But in terms of like actually getting started with a fully formed project, I mean, JavaScript, well, lots of projects have project template generators, and JavaScript in theory sounded like it was going to have a standardized setup for that with the likes of Yeoman all those years ago. But I mean, I think my first project, setting it up with Yeoman, wouldn't compile out of the box. I didn't have a pleasant experience with that. But yeah, I'm not sure what project out or what language and framework out of the box is the most easy to jump into. Like for the most part, I think I still always need to do some kind of copy an existing project and configure it to look the way that I like. But yeah, that's a small gripe. I mean, I've got projects in so many languages at this stage that those are changes from maybe no, they can go into this commit. But I've projects in all the languages that hopefully I'm going to want to develop future projects in. I don't think I have the capacity for learning many more languages at this stage. But I have projects with project layouts more or less the way I like them in most languages and frameworks that I use these days. But yeah, JavaScript, I have a complicated relationship with JavaScript. I think most people can admit to that. Commit adds support for arithmetic operators. Even though it's not just arithmetic, I do have concatenation snuck in there, but that's good enough as a commit message for the moment, I think. I mean, like, I started off with C++. There's pros, and no matter what language you choose, there's always going to be trade-offs. I mean, such is the nature of everything, really. No matter how you start learning anything, there's going to be trade-offs in how you decide to go about it. And as long as you persist with it, then, I mean, yeah, like, also depending on the era when you said you were about to learn JavaScript, if it was like back when I remember learning the likes of JavaScript and you would run it in the browser and it would just fail silently and there was no such thing as debug tools, I would probably give a nervous laugh if someone said that they were wanting to learn JavaScript first. But these days I would generally be pushing people to learn JavaScript first, because for all its inconsistencies and crazy ecosystem, it's a fairly ubiquitous language, and the fact that you don't actually need to install anything to get going, I mean, in general, I would say everyone has a browser on their desktop, and so you can just start writing JavaScript. It can be inline in a HTML file. It's still running JavaScript. So the barrier to entry is so low and the feedback so immediate that, yeah, that's probably one of the languages that you can actually jump into that. And now that I mention it, yeah, that was a nice project one time where I just jumped in. I had just one HTML file and I imported Vue into it from a CDN version of Vue. And I was able to just start implementing a web app from scratch. And I later turned it into a properly structured project, but I was able to do a fairly complete MVP, minimum viable product. Yeah, I was thinking MWP, minimum working product. No, but I was able to get a fairly well-rounded MVP written in it before I decided, okay, yeah, this is actually a product / project that I'll use, and turned it into gave it a proper structure. But no, I mean, I think starting off with JavaScript is definitely a very positive way of getting into programming, because one of the big things as well with learning any new skill, I think there are so many dimensions you can evaluate things on, but in general, the language you pick or the approach that you pick for learning anything that keeps you engaged for the longest before potentially giving up is the best one, in my opinion. So if JavaScript creates such a low barrier to entry that you're able to do it for months and years before you're like, oh, this is a pain, I want to learn a different language or something, then it's gotten you over enough hurdles to keep you engaged that it was worth it. So C++, yeah, you get a really good, like that was my first language as well. And it gives you, same as C or lots of languages at that time, gave you a really well-rounded understanding of the von Neumann model and what's actually happening under the hood in terms of program execution. That's all well and good, but man, it was a slog, and I probably did have to put it down a bunch of times and then pick it up again later. Same with Rust, actually. It took me like 3 or 4 attempts to actually stick with Rust and be like, okay, I kind of get this now. But the bigger those barriers are, the more likely it is that you're going to give up at some stage. So I definitely wouldn't disparage anyone who's getting into programming by learning JavaScript. Switching from C++ to Rust, yeah, like I would imagine. I mean, even when I was learning Rust first, it had been a while since I had even looked at C and the like. I guess up until that point, my daily driver for a couple of years was probably Go. And I mean, that's nice. It gives you a kind of a sense that you're still working with bare metal to a certain degree, but it's abstracting all the pointer magic for the most part. And even though I feel like C++ to Rust, in my understanding, because I know very little about any recent C++, like automatic pointers and things like that, and I feel like the way Go addressed seems to me like a way of addressing loads of issues with C and Java, which were, I guess, two of the big languages. Well, C++ and Java were probably the main languages being used at Google, but I feel like Go more addressed issues with C and Java and kind of bunched those together in a language. I feel like Rust mostly takes a lot of ideas from what I know of modern C++ and making it more, I'm not going to say user-friendly, but at least makes it harder to shoot yourself in the foot, same as Go does with the likes of C. Yeah, well, and the thing with JavaScript as well is, despite the mess that is the fact that it will, well, actually, I was going to say the mess that is the fact that it will continue execution even when it encounters an error, but that's not quite the case, and especially once you run it in the actual command line, that's changed a lot as well. So that's more an old conception of mine. That's still the case. Hey, Counterain. Oh, and yeah, in terms of being nearly like English, I guess Python will probably always take the top spot for that. But then that's more a superficial level of that, isn't it? Like the fact that it says, like the fact that ands and ors are the word and or and the likes. So, oh, thanks very much for the question. So, yeah, so the language itself is called Seed. So you can check it out here on the, I think there's a link in the description for the channel as well. So what this one I'm like developing at the moment is, oh, maybe should I go into the history? So I had this other language called Norpal that I was developing in a live stream for about the bones of a year. Both it and Seed is basically taking the Norpal language, which stood for not a real programming language. It's essentially a research language. It's going to be a core that I build other language ideas on top of. But in a nutshell, Seed is a C-style language, just with a core kernel of the general features you might be used to in a lot of modern, I would say, dynamic. So in terms of static types, so it's dynamically typed but strongly typed. So think Python. So types are only defined on values at runtime, but they have types. So if you, for example, one of my tests here, for example, for runtime errors, if you try to add true with an object, then you'll get an error that you can't do that because the types are incompatible. So it's a dynamically typed, I would say, yeah, I think language, even though it's called Seed, well, I guess a seed, I don't know the exact correlation between a seed and a kernel. I guess both could be considered similar enough, but well, my going off on way too many tangents, but the idea is it's a programming language kernel that has a core critical mass of features that you would be used to. Why dynamic? One of the main reasons is the language that I'll be building after it. So first of all, Seedlang is aiming to be a language that will allow me to, and similar to Norpal. So do I have a good demonstration of Norpal? Seed is just basically rebuilding Norpal from the ground up, but adding tests and better structure. And so let me see here. Isn't there an example test file, test 6? I mean, that's probably a good enough overview of, did I have, wait, was there, I have too many trains of thought going on right now, but let's see. So getting back to the question of why dynamic. So mostly because the language, first of all, it's easy. You know, I don't have to go into the, I used to be very interested in type systems and the likes in college, but how do I get rid of that? I'll just refresh the page. Okay. This is a pity that this isn't, in fact, if I download it, oh no, I don't want to download it. I want to just get the raw file and I'll be able to do syntax highlighting with it, I think. Oh, no. Oh, yeah. So, that actually, so Vim opened the remote file, I think. So that's it with syntax highlighting. But getting back to why dynamic, first of all, it's straightforward. I don't have to dive back into the likes of, what was it, Lindy Milner type theory and the likes, and simple type theory and all the rest of it. I could just focus on the kind of programming language features for the most part, and also the so I wanted to try out different programming language ideas, but one of the main ideas for an actual programming language is essentially a bash replacement. This file is kind of maybe a look at the first implementation of what that might look like. I've actually revised my thoughts on how a lot of this will look. So it was wanting to keep the ergonomics of bash, so make it very easy to call, for example, call processes or start processes and capture the results. So do I have an example of that? I don't actually there, but one example of this was, for example, you can see that there are dollars for all the variables, same as PHP style, and that was so that if you then actually wrote an unadorned string and call it, that would actually call the curl process or start the curl program, turn it into a process, capture the output, and you could store the result in a variable. Since actually converting a real life script, so to speak, into this language, I've kind of changed my opinion, because even in a script like that, you are dealing with variables so much more often than you're actually starting processes, that I've decided, okay, I'll actually make a shorthand. I'll make it so that you don't need dollars for variables, but you have a special syntax for calling processes. And yeah, that's a whole tangent. But coming back to dynamic typing, again, that's so that first language that I want to build on top of Seed to a production level will be dynamically typed, because it'll be aiming to fill that same slot as bash scripting, but make bash scripting a little more, I wouldn't say ergonomic in the sense that bash itself is very ergonomic for what it does, but the syntax, I would say, is very foreign to a lot of people. Even at this stage I'm fairly comfortable with it, but it's kind of like Stockholm syndrome. I can do it, but I don't really want other people to have to suffer the same fate as I did. And so wanting to give it maybe a bit more of a familiar feel, so that it can be easier to write scripts, robust scripts that do what you expect, but do it in a kind of readable way, and a way that makes it clear it's doing the right thing. And so what languages did I get to work with? In terms of like over the years, or like what languages have I used in general? Or sorry, this question is probably from a while ago, as I've been digressing, but in general, yeah, that's an interesting question. Like, I guess I will just prefix that answer by saying that, especially when I was in college, I was very interested in programming languages, and they were kind of my two, I guess, three fields of interests were, I guess, programming languages and the theory around them, operating systems, and type theory with regards to ensuring correctness in programs. And I've ended up focusing a lot on programming languages, and in the course of doing that, I would say I've developed non-trivial programs in, I would say, I think I've counted it before, and it's over 20 languages. But then there's so much crossover between so many of them that, there can be a lot of crossover, but I think it was 20. or thereabouts last time I actually went through them in my head. But you could probably classify those then in terms of, you have kind of, so many of the C style languages are very similar in nature. I mean, even if you start looking at the likes of Java and C Sharp right off the bat, they're almost the same language. Yeah, it gives you a very broad overview, and also gives you a good sense about just what does make a language unique versus what's kind of syntax level. And so two of the big classifiers are, I think, in terms of functional versus non-functional, and that's actually more in terms of syntax or surface level syntax versus the actual operation of the language, because you can have functional languages that look like C style languages. Oh, that's very cool. And so you can have languages that look like C style languages but operate very differently. But then when you have functional languages like the likes of, the likes of Haskell, where you get very pure, it does force you to think very differently. But whether that's because it's C, or whether that's because it's styled in a functional way, in a very pure functional way, because then you also have the likes of, what would they be called? Were they called stack programming languages or catenation languages? The likes of Factor and Forth, where you essentially have a stack of operations. Yeah, actually, Agda is an interesting one, because I never really, that was one area where I guess it was not after my time, but by the time I was getting more exposure to the likes of proof systems, or before proof systems had entered my awareness, I was kind of going beyond my ventures into programming languages. I did play around and really liked the ideas of Idris, and was writing an implementation of APL in that. I mean, APL is a whole other kettle of fish. I mean, it was cool how when programming languages were first being developed, you right out of the gate got these such diverse languages, like the likes of APL, Lisp, and the likes of, like Eiffel, and, well, no, what was before Eiffel? There was, I guess, Fortran and COBOL, but those are still all relatively von Neumann kind of languages, I guess. But yeah, right out the gate there was such diversity, and since then we've kind of really honed in on the C style languages in general. But no, I've never worked with COBOL or Fortran. Not sure why. I guess, again, back when I was interested in these kind of things, I probably I guess when I was interested in learning lots of different languages, I was really focused on finding my language that made sense to me, that I wanted to work with on a daily basis. And so I really tried to deep dive into each language. And in terms of just practicality, COBOL and Fortran didn't seem like, unless I was thinking of working at a bank, I wasn't probably going to look too seriously at one of those. Nix, as in the Nix package manager, is it? Yeah, good question. I guess, just full transparency, I have very little familiarity of it. It's something that, similar to I was big into Xmonad and the likes back in college because I felt it gave a very pure view of the system, and I relate that to Nix in that my understanding of it is that it's sorry, the programming language or the package manager, or am I confusing things? Because there's a Nix. Okay, I can't remember the Nix programming language. No, it's been a while since. I'd say. Let me just double check. I vaguely. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So it is the language as well. So, like, at least when I came across this first, I really liked the idea in theory. But I mean the whole idea of a pure environment where if you have a system set up and you replay it, it's kind of not idempotent, immutable, I guess. And so you can reliably say that, okay, if it worked in this state and I add these dependencies and stuff breaks and I remove it again, then I'll have the system the way it was before. And that sounds great in theory. I guess one of the big blockers for me was having to learn a new system, especially when it came to, like I was saying before, actually configuring my environment. I really just want to do the minimum amount of work I can to get my environment set up and then just forget about it completely. And a lot of what I think can be achieved with Nix, for me, I feel I can achieve the same to my own satisfaction just with Docker. And so what I do is with any of my projects, in fact, with the current project as well, the Seed programming language, I define essentially a build environment that has a minimal environment that just has the stuff I need to build that language and run it, and has its, for example, the linters and things like that. And so any project that I do, I define that build Docker file. And I'm sure you get a lot more with it. And I mean, it's your whole system, isn't it? I mean, it's not just your development environment. But for me, the only thing I'm interested in with Nix is the build environment reliability, basically, because I guess a bit of information on my setup actually here. I'm not sure if you can see the tabs at the top, but I'm actually using a Mac environment. So even though I guess it's worth going into this a bit, but I have a bit of a funny setup. So I like the user environment. Well, I wouldn't say I like, but I think the best user environment, like desktop environment experience, is Mac, just because it's so reliable. I've used Linux for so many years at this stage and had so many issues with breaking desktop environments and things just looking ugly and things being rough around the edges, that once I actually got someone else's Mac as a hand-me-down for a while and used it for a bit, and it was already a couple of years old by that stage, and was like realizing just how stable it was, I was like, this is perfect for me, because again, I can just forget about it. And then in terms of, but I had massive issues developing anything on Mac. I mean, I like, even just from the outset, when you want to do something, again, my experiences are probably potentially outdated at this point, but I remember if you wanted to start developing, you either had to install ports or brew or something, and to even install those, you had to like accept a user license to install the Mac version of GCC or some kind of like even like that wasn't a difficult thing, but just the fact that you had to accept an agreement to start developing just always kind of grated with me. And I used to have massive problems with using brew and ports and things to install stuff. The tool chain was always brittle, dealing with different versions of Python. Like, I tried it for a couple of years, I think, and different languages, not just Python, but I'd be using Java, I'd be using C# there for a while, which was, yeah, very interesting. Trying to run Visual Studios on Mac, it felt kind of dirty, but I was doing it for a while. And yeah, eventually just got to the point where I was like, yes, I like the desktop, the user experience of a Mac, but I cannot develop on Mac. And so what I've actually been doing for probably the bones of 5 years now is actually running I just SSH into a box running in the cloud, and that just runs Debian, and it just chugs along. I don't think I've ever really had an issue with it. It's the same box that I've been using for a while. I should probably refresh it in terms of, I don't know, I'm just worrying at one of these days that the SSD will fail or something, and the data won't be properly backed up or something. But I have all my own stuff backed up anyway, so it's not too big of an issue. But basically I develop only on Linux, but within a Mac desktop environment. And for me, it's kind of the best of every world, every world, in terms of I also don't, that's another thing as well, is that I don't, so to add to the complexity, so I have my Mosh SSHing in every time, so that my sessions are stable, and I use my tmux to get all my different sessions and split panes and all the rest of it. And then within that box, so like you were saying with Nix, again, Nix sounds like, well, at least in terms of what I'd be using it for, it would just be for the development environment, because that's really all that's running in this box. But I don't actually have any, like, Go is my daily driver, more or less. It's what I use for work, and I don't have any of these environments installed. All of them are installed using Docker containers. So if I, for example, what's a Docker images grep? Let's see, what's the current project that I'm working on? Is it seed? Yeah, and so like it's a pretty big image, but all of the language. In fact, if I do a grep for Zenmodo, I'll do all my personal ones. So yeah, all of my projects, these are all the build images that I'm using. In fact, they are all tagged with build as well. Yeah, and so for me, it's got a lot of benefits, but again, probably similar to what I would be looking for from Nix anyway, in terms of once I have it set up, it's a reliable thing. I can actually remove this build image from my system, and later if I decide to pull down the same project and the build image installs as expected, like all the different layers are still available at the versions that they were set to, then I could be fairly confident that the project is going to build again. It means that, yeah, it has been useful because you can see some of these build environments get pretty big, especially the ones to do with Rust. So it can be useful when I'm hopping between projects, and I do have quite a lot of them, that I can remove a project relatively easily, get back a bunch of disk space if I need it, and then I can jump back to it again later if I need to. And like, yeah, it might be more of a sunk cost thing for me as well, in the sense that Docker is what I've used for this in the past, and so I'm used to that way of working with it. And the idea of having to learn a new programming language to kind of get the same effect is, again, if I start thinking about that, I'm like, my eyes start glazing over. I've definitely lost the useful curiosity of learning all of these things. But in terms of, yeah, I'm kind of, I guess, used to this way of doing it now. And yeah, like, it's an idea that, again, I like in theory, but it's gotten to the point where I'm so used to the way that I do it now, and I feel so, I guess, I've used it to my satisfaction that I know it's relatively stable what I'm doing, that it would take a lot to convince me to use Nix at this point. So that's kind of, again, I really like the idea, and I think if more systems could be made pure and the likes like that, and that would be really nice. But yeah, and yeah, well, that's a big point to it as well, in the sense that if you're going to be using it as your setup for environments from that point on, and especially if you know that you're going to be hopping, or not necessarily hopping, but you're going to be setting up environments a couple of times, then makes a lot of sense to me, especially in terms of getting your environment set up just the way you like it, in terms of IDEs and and in terms of desktop environment. Like, and actually that's a good point as well. If I were to go back to Linux now and actually use that as my development environment, in terms of actually use the desktop environment, I probably would be quite tempted by the likes of Nix to set it up like that. But even then, I'm at this point now where I basically just work from the two screens that I have are more or less the browser and the terminal for me. So as long as I have a fairly reliable terminal and browser, then I don't really need a whole pile else. Yeah, the other programs just come in kind of on the fringe for me. But again, yeah, really like the idea of Nix, and if more configuration could be made as pure as it, then I think that would be really cool. I mean, it shows, I guess, a lot of just insight from what I know of what they were able to accomplish with Nix. I mean, it seems very sophisticated, the whole system. But yeah, I don't know, that that sentence from me just started running out of steam there, didn't it? But in terms of actually coming back to where I am now, where are we? Oh, I've just hit the 2 hour mark for the for the stream. Yeah, that's a good point, I think, and getting the basics solid. But in terms of the stream, I'm actually going to, I think, leave it there. What did I get? I had only intended to add the arithmetic operators, I think, and I got those done, but it actually turned out to have a lot more going on as well, in terms of kind of pinpointing operator errors and the different type errors that can occur as well. And that added, it gave me the ability to update some of the other tests as well. So pretty happy with how that session went. And thanks very much for the chats, everyone. It was really nice to engage with people again. Been a while since I've been streaming, so it's nice to like I say, jump back into the chats again. In fact, I have let me see here. I've been setting up a Discord. I'm hoping to have a bit more activity on it. Let me see, copy here. So it'll be hopefully, it's more or less empty now. Want to get to the next level? No, that's okay. So it's more or less empty now, but hoping to get a bit of activity there and update it when I'm adding more information about the current programming language and potential other languages that sprout out for it. I'd love to talk with other programming language enthusiasts and get their feedback on different bits and pieces. So hoping to get that, I guess, trundling along steadily at some point too. But thanks again to everyone who is watching the stream, everyone who engaged in the conversation, and might see you over the next couple of days again. So thanks very much and take care.